In today's lesson, we're going to be covering how dispensers and droppers work and just about everything else that you need to know about them. Let's go! If you are not familiar with these, we have the dispensers on the right hand side and the droppers on the left hand side. Now, identifying these can sometimes be confusing. However, if you click on these, it will actually say dispenser on the top, and this one will say dropper on the top. You can also tell by looking at the textures on them. However, keep in mind if you are using different texture packs, it may or may not change the appearance of the droppers and dispensers. So the dispenser is pretty much going to have a round hole most all of the time, whether it is up or whether it is facing towards the side. You can see we have a round hole there and a round hole there. However, if we go over to the dropper, we have a pretty much square hole or rectangle hole facing upwards. However, whenever it goes to the side, for whatever reason, the texture is different, and then we have a triangle instead of a rectangle. I don't really know the reason for the difference in the textures, however, I'm just pointing these out, that way you can easily identify them. Now, the droppers and the dispensers are very similar, however, they do have different functions, and depending on the application, they may or may not work for your application. One of the similarities that they share is that they can both power a component that is directly to the side of them. So if you remember in previous lessons we went over the pistons, and if you hard power a piston, it's not going to be able to power the one directly next to it if it does not have its own power source. So even if you are hard powering it here, it will not power the piston to the side, regardless if it is to the side, to the top, or to the bottom. However, if you remember discussing the note blocks and also the lamps, these do have the same characteristics, so if we are soft powering this block here, or even hard powering it, it's going to possess the ability to power the block directly next to it, even though it's not being hard powered. And that basically means that the dropper and the dispenser are going to possess this ability as well. Regardless if they are being soft powered or hard powered, it is still going to power the dropper directly next to it. However, just like the redstone lamps and also the note blocks, it does have to be an actual piece of redstone line or a hard powering device going into the side of it. So if you have a regular solid block here and you decide to soft power it like this, then it's only going to power this one inside of the center. And the same thing goes if you hard power this one right here, it's going to hard power this block, soft powering this one. However, because it's being soft powered or hard powered by a block, it's not going to allow it to carry on to the dropper next to it. And as mentioned, it's going to be the same for the note blocks and also the redstone lamps. So since we are directly soft powering this one here in the center, it's going to power this one to the side and this one to the side as well. So as you can see, if we hit that button, it's going to power all three of them. And the exact same thing is going to happen whenever we do the dispensers as well. So if we hit that, you can see it pops three of them up as well. So as mentioned, both of these are very similar. However, they do have different characteristics that you need to look out for, and that is dependent on your application that you're using them in. So for example, we have the wooden planks inside of the droppers here, and then we also have the wooden planks inside of the dispensers here. Because dispensers do not dispense actual solid blocks, these are just going to pop out just like a dropper would. So if we hit that, you can see it pops the items out, and if we hit that, you can see it pops the items out too. However, if we come over here, we have some tridents in here, and then we also have some tridents in this dropper as well. So if we hit the button on the dispenser, since this trident here will actually function with the dispenser, we can hit that, and as you can see, it launched it way up in the sky, and oh, I don't know where it went. Run! Oh, that was close. Good thing I'm in creative or I'd be dead. So as you can see, it actually dispensed it up inside of the sky. However, whenever we try to do the same thing with the dropper, it's just going to drop it as an item form, and the dropper will always drop them as the item form. However, the dispenser will sometimes drop them as the item form, depending if they are actually able to work with the dispenser or not. Some things that will actually work with the dispensers are something like the fire charges, bows and arrows, tridents like you just saw, and things of that nature. As always, I highly recommend taking a look on the Minecraft wiki. That's going to be linked down inside the description below, and that will basically cover all of the items that are going to be able to be shot or deployed out of a dispenser. Now, the dropper does have another really cool characteristic about it, and that is if it is facing the output end into a chest or a container, as you can see here, then it is actually able to dispense into that chest directly. So it could be a hopper, it could be a chest, a trap chest, another dropper, another dispenser. As long as it is a container, it will pretty much dispense into it. And if we pull this out here, and then we check, we have 63 items here. We can hit this button, and as you can see, we have 62 now, and now it put one inside of the chest. We can hit that again, and it's going to dispense it directly into the chest every time that this dropper is clicked. However, if we turn over here, we have a dispenser, and as you can see, we have 61 there, and we don't have anything inside of the chest. If we hit this one here, it's not going to dispense it inside of that chest, it's going to dispense it off to the side, and it's not even going to go into the container. So keep that in mind if you ever plan on trying to put anything inside of a chest. You have to use a dropper, you cannot use a dispenser. And as I mentioned, the hoppers, the exact same thing applies because these are going to be considered a container, although they have specific functions that they can do. So keep in mind, if you are dispensing this into the hopper, it doesn't have to be facing into the actual input of the hopper or the bottom of the hopper. It can be facing into practically any part of this hopper, including the spout here. And it can also be facing into whatever part of the chest that you would like. You can put it in the top, the sides, the bottom, it really does not matter. However, the same thing applies here. We have a dropper here, and we don't have any items in here because obviously it would just flow from this hopper to this hopper to this hopper and back into here. And the same thing goes with the dispenser over here. So if we hit this button, you can see it's going to briefly take one out and then it's going to put it back in. So 63, 64, and that's because it's dispensing it into here. This hopper sending it over, sending it down, sending it over, and it's going right back in. So pretty much in a big loop. However, again, if we do that with the dispenser, we'll hit that. And instead of going inside of that hopper, it is actually being dispensed right inside of the hopper. And since this is not inside of the area that the hopper would actually pick it up, it's not going to be able to pick it up. It's just going to kind of glitch inside of the hopper and never do anything. So technically it's inside of the block. And to demonstrate that again, we can hit another one, and another one, and another one. And as you can see, we have several more in there. But if we check all of the hoppers and all of the droppers and the dispenser, you can see we never get any of those back inside of that dispenser. Now let's take a second and see if the dispenser and the dropper is able to be waterlogged. If we go over here to the dispenser, we can crouch and try to waterlog it. And as you can see, we have flowing water out of it. However, if we remove that, you can see the water flows over, meaning that that's not going to be waterlogged. So if we remove this water here and we replace it back down here, if we take the dispenser and place it back down, that's going to remove the water altogether. So because this is a solid block, it's not going to be able to be waterlogged at all. And if we have flowing water and we put the dispenser down, it's not going to break it down into an item either. And the properties are pretty much going to be exactly the same with the dropper. So if we try to waterlog it, as you can see, it doesn't actually waterlog it. It just places the water to the side of it. So if we remove this, the water actually flows this direction. And then we can remove that again, place that down, take the dropper. And as soon as we place that dropper down, it's going to get rid of that water, showing that it is in fact not waterloggable. We can place some more water down, put the dropper over here, and of course it's not going to be broken off as an item either. And as far as the light testing goes, we can take the dropper and place the dropper down here, and you can see that it's pretty much pitch black. We remove that and place down a dispenser. Same story with the dispenser. So if we seal this up, you can see that it is totally pitch black. So this is indeed blocking all of the light that's going to be able to come through here. Which is really nice, because if you need to pop one of these inside of the side of a farm or a trident killer, kind of like I do with my witch farm design, then it's not going to allow any light to get in and ruin your farm. So let's move on and see if we can actually get power through these guys. If we hit this, we have the repeater going into the dropper here, and then that's going to hopefully hard power that redstone dust on the other side of it. So if we hit that, you can see that it does indeed pass the power through it, unlike a piston or a bunch of other components. And I think this has a lot to do with this being a specific set of components that can actually pass and power the block that's directly next to it. Aside from being like a piston, which really isn't going to carry that signal any further, even if it has a block or redstone directly next to it. And as you can see, we have the same story with the dispenser here. And if we do it opposite here, remember the repeater can actually pull signal through a soft powered block and turn it into a hard powered signal. So if we hit this, you can see that that repeater will actually work opposite and actually read the signal through this redstone line and dropper or dispenser. So let's take a look at some of the cool things that we can do with droppers and dispensers. So as mentioned in previous episodes, we have the droppers here, and these droppers are always going to shoot items out. Now this will work the exact same way with the dispensers. However, if you're using this for something like a mob farm, and that mob farm produces something like arrows or tridents, something that is actually projectile, if you are using a dispenser, it will actually dispense it, like you saw earlier in today's video. So if you have any kind of application like that, I would strongly recommend using a dropper instead. However, this dropper will typically have an output of around 2 hopper speed, which is going to be about 5 items per second. However, if you use something called a comparator clock, as shown in previous episodes, then you are able to boost this to about 2.5 hopper speed, which is about 7 items per second. And that is the reason why we have 3 lines of hoppers going into this, because if we only had 2 here, then the limiting factor would actually be the hoppers, because the hoppers will only flow 2.5 items per second. And in layman's terms, that means that you can build something that unloads very quickly. Which is very nice, because if you have this on a mob farm and you don't want to run a ton of hoppers all the way around, you can just have this thing unloading into an ice stream, and then you just have 1 lane of traffic going to your sorting system. Just remember that your system is only as fast as the slowest component. And then we also have some other extremely useful things like a dropper elevator, which you see here. All of these droppers are pointing straight up, and that's going to allow this to transfer the items up very quickly. However, keep in mind, as we learned, the droppers are the only ones that are able to actually dispense into another container, which would be the above dropper on top of each of these. So this only works with the droppers, it will not work with the dispensers. As far as this goes, you should be able to identify and build this just solely by what I have taught you in the course of the lesson, starting from the very beginning all the way till this point now. It is just a matter of taking what I have taught you and using your brain to put all of this stuff together and make something work. So for example, in today's episode we learned about the droppers and what they are able to do, which was being able to dispense into another container. So we know since we can do this over and over again, which we are essentially doing here. So this one is going to dispense into this one's going to dispense into this one, and so forth. And then we had the very first lesson where we learned how to use the glass in order to stir up redstone. And every time that we stir this redstone up, it's actually powering into the side of these droppers. We learned on today's episode that we can actually soft power one of these droppers and it's going to power whatever component is next to it. This includes above and below, so if we're powering it here, we know that it's going to power the one above it. Same with this one here, we know this one here is going to power this one. It's going to power the one below it, and it's going to power the one above it. And so forth all the way up the ladder. And that is the reason why up here we have one line going into this. However, because this one here is powering the one above it and below it, there's no need to actually have redstone powering this one up top. In previous episodes, we learned about the comparator and how we can use that to make an actual comparator clock, which is exactly what we're doing here. We're using the comparator to read the signal here. And whenever there is at least one item inside of here, it's going to force this comparator to put out a signal of 1. And then this repeater is going to take that signal strength of 1 and boost it to a signal strength of 15, which is going to power this comparator here to a signal power of 15, which is in subtract mode, which is going to force it to subtract. So it's going to power this 15, 14, 13. And since the 13 is lower than the 15 coming out of it, it's going to force this comparator to turn off, making it stop putting out the signal strength of 15, which is going to force this to then turn back on and put out another signal strength of 15 because it's no longer being told to shut off by the signal strength going into the side of it. And then as discussed, it's basically going to do that over and over very quickly, making a very fast clock. And then we're going to have the redstone signal strength like we learned on the very first episode, 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6 would be the furthest signal strength away. So as long as we are getting a signal strength of at least 1 going into the side of these, they are going to be powered and do exactly what we need them to. To see this thing in action, all we have to do is come down here and throw some items inside of here. And as soon as we do that, it is going to start dispensing them very quickly. Now the dropper elevator does not have to go straight up. You can make this go sideways, you can make it go down. However, one of the really big advantages of this is, as you just saw, the speed of it. This thing is able to put out the 2.5 hopper speed all the way up and dispense those items very quickly whenever it's paired with a comparator clock. On top of that, you're also not able to carry items upwards with a hopper, which makes the dropper tower just overall convenient. Now you might be thinking, why don't you just use the bubble column? And you can just use the bubble column, and it's not too hard to dispense them into that bubble column at a speed of 2.5 hopper speed. However, as I mentioned, that your system is only going to flow as fast as the slowest component inside of it. So if you have all of that flowing up out of the bubble column and into a single hopper, that means that your entire system is going to be bottlenecked down to 2.5 hopper speed. So in order to mitigate against that, you would have to extend it out by at least 3. That way you could get 2.5 hopper speed. Because with 3 hoppers, you obviously have a maximum of 3 hopper speed. And making a system like this can quickly induce a lot more lag and be overall larger and more complicated than just using a hopper tower. Well guys, that's going to about wrap up the dispensers and the droppers. Hopefully I taught you something new, and if I did or you have any questions, drop a comment down below and let me know. I do apologize for the scratchy voice. I am dealing with allergies, and it is absolutely no fun. Be sure to catch tomorrow's episode. We are going to be going over hoppers, and there's quite a bit to go over, so I'll see you there. Thanks for watching.